with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name's Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts, sitting in the shadow of the Great Blue Hill. We are so very honored and so delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families all around the world grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show and let them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Good Pods, Podchase, and Podcast Addict, wherever you find your favorite shows. Two wonderful guests today. Alison McGrath will be here to celebrate Walter and the Worry Test. And later on in the show, we meet author and librarian Robert Broder, who'll be celebrating his book, Reading Together. Attention all adventure seekers. Get ready to embark on an epic journey with Tim Wright's The Adventures of Toby Baxter middle grade series. Join Toby Baxter on his thrilling escapades filled with mystery, friendship, and courage. With two exciting books already in the series, now is the perfect time to catch up before the release of the highly anticipated third installment. Book 1, The River Elf, The Giant, and the Closet, is a high-flying middle-grade fantasy. If you like daring journeys, hilarious characters, and heartfelt lessons about confidence, then you'll love the first installment in the series. Book number 2 is River Home for the Holidays, a humorous, tongue-in-cheek middle school age science fiction book. This quest is filled with holiday fun, dangers, and inspiration, sure to capture the imagination of lovers of thriller and fantasy adventures. But the adventure doesn't stop there. Be prepared for even more excitement in the upcoming release of book number 3, Aloha River Home, The Good Prophecy. Don't miss out on the excitement. Start your adventure today with books number 1 and 2 and be ready for Tim's book number 3 when it hits the shelves. The Adventures of Toby Baxter Middle Grade Series by Tim Wright. It's available wherever books are sold. Are you looking for a creative way to bond with your kids? Let me tell you all about Drawing with Your Kids, the ultimate destination for artistic adventures. Join us as we dive into the wonderful world of children's books with renowned illustrators guiding you step by step. From beloved characters to whimsical scenes, unleash your imagination and create cherished memories together. Whether you're a seasoned artist or just picking up a pencil, there's something for everyone at Drawing with Your Kids. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and click on the Drawing with Your Kids link at the top of the page and let the creativity flow. Drawing with Your Kids, where every stroke brings stories to life. I am so excited. We are going to have a great time today. Our guest is coming to us from just down the street from our Reedville studios. She is here to celebrate Walter and the Worry Test. Please welcome to the show, Alison McGrath. Hey, Alison, how are you?
Hey, Jed, thanks so much for having me.
I'm delighted to have a neighbor on the show. Alison and I were just chatting about some of the people that we both know and the communities that we both know. And so it is a very small world.
It sure is.
Yeah. Tell us about Walter and the Worry Test, please.
Sure, I'd love to. So this story is a children's picture book. It's about a boy named Walter. And Walter, just like many of us, has a lot of worries. And so he goes and visits his school counselor, and she helps him to reframe his negative mindset and some of those worry thoughts in order to reduce some of his symptoms of anxiety. So it's really a beautiful story about a little boy who is just not feeling like himself. His teacher notices, and he uses the support of his school counselor to really work through some of these difficult thoughts and feelings.
Well, Walter's very lucky because, I've traveled and done educational magic shows at schools for 35 years all over the country. And I found, surprisingly, in a lot of schools, a librarian and a school counselor are hard, if not impossible, to find.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that more and more school counselors are turning up, and you're hearing about school adjustment counselors. But for a long time, it was guidance counselors, if even that. And guidance counselors really focused on more of like the academic side. But even when I first started working in schools, or I went to Lesley University to get my master's in school counseling. And even then, school adjustment counseling was a little bit of a foreign term. And that wasn't all that long ago, probably 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. We hear, and we've talked about it a lot on the podcast, that the incidence of childhood anxiety is on the rise. In your opinion, is it really that more kids are becoming anxious, or are we just able to identify more kids, or is it a combination of both?
I think a combination of both, and it's interesting. I get that question a lot. I think since the pandemic, I think we're definitely seeing more anxiety. I think there's been more light sort of shed on some of these challenges that kids face. But I also think, like, back to when I was a kid, in school in the early 90s, and things were not talked about as much. People were told, if you don't cut that out, I'm going to take you to a doctor, like almost as like a threat. And I think now there's more. I mean, we're in May, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So there's an entire month now dedicated to supporting the wellness and the mental wellness and well-being of others. And I think that there has been this sort of stigma around anxiety, around mental health. And, I think as we progress and as we move forward, I think people are really starting to realize that, or at least my hope is that mental health is health. So I do think it's a combination, that we're reducing some of that stigma, but also there's now supports in place to help.
Yeah, well, you're certainly right. I went to school a few decades earlier than you, and it certainly wasn't talked about. And I know because my dad had some mental health challenges that were never talked about. And so it's a real good thing that we are talking about it and more people are getting help. Can you talk a little bit? I think when people hear anxiety and someone's struggling with anxiety, they think, they're worried about some things and just chill out, relax. It's more than that. Am I right? Is there a physical component to it?
Yeah, absolutely. And so to get into kind of to dive into the book a little bit more, what the book really is teaching kids is that all thoughts lead to certain feelings, which then lead to certain behaviors or actions. And that's really based on the fundamentals of cognitive behavioral therapy. And so the challenge is when thoughts are in your head that then kind of go around and around in a circle, or we call them like intrusive or repetitive thoughts, and you just can't get rid of them. They're unwanted. They're not pleasant. And that usually causes us to feel a certain way. So I always say what we need to pay attention to is when those thoughts are starting to impact your daily life, those thoughts are starting to impact the things that you typically like to do. So, for example, in Walter's case, he loves to be with his friends. He loves to play sports. And there's actually a picture in the book that shows his worries. It personifies his worries that are so big and so large, and they're just impacting his day-to-day activities that he enjoys doing. And so that's really where we as practitioners and clinicians really want to pay, and families want to pay attention to, is there a change in behavior? Is there a change in daily routine? Is there a change in kind of overall availability? And being present. And that's really where the anxiety itself is different than just worried thoughts. And that's really when it becomes a problem.
when you were mentioning having a thought kind of go round and round, I had this image of water going down the drain and that kind of whirlpool action, and that, if I have an intrusive thought and that's kind of what it's doing in my brain, I can absolutely understand feeling anxious or feeling out of control and overwhelmed.
Definitely. And another way to visualize, I just talked about this the other day, is sort of like that hamster on a wheel, and it's just kind of going around and around and around. And, to be fully transparent, as now I'm 40 and I'm learning more about myself than I ever have. And I always thought that I couldn't focus. And I think many of our students and children are like, why can't I pay attention? Why can't I focus? And it wasn't that I couldn't attend. It was, well, I couldn't, but it was because my mind was so focused on those what if thoughts, those worry thoughts, which unfortunately caused me to have such significant gaps in my learning. And it wasn't because I wasn't capable. It was because I was just so focused on something else. And now as an adult, I'm learning that when our amygdala, so like that lower part of our brain is activated, you can't access that frontal lobe and that area that does all that kind of critical thinking and learning and reasoning, because when your amygdala is like turned on and activated, it makes it really hard to do all of those other things. So, and it's called the hand-brain model, and I use that when teaching children to try and help them visualize, to see what does this look like and what is actually happening in my brain. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just the way my brain is working and wired right now.
And Walter, in the worry test, do you get into that? Do we learn about the brain and how it's functioning?
So I don't get into the technicalities around the brain so much as the cognitive behavioral triangle. And what I really tried to do was make that adaptable for kids, because I think, as adults, we can easily say, okay, your thought is, I draw a triangle and I'm going to show you your thoughts connected to a feeling, which is then connected to a behavior, and it's a cycle. But with children, I think they respond so much more to pictures, to illustrations, to also to characters that are not themselves. And so that's really where I have found bibliotherapy to be such an amazing vehicle for teaching children. And that's really where Walter was born. I felt like there was such a need based on the anxiety, and earlier and earlier on, we're seeing more and more signs of it. And to use a tool such as cognitive behavioral therapy, which has been widely studied and researched and has a great impact. So how could I connect both of those things into a vehicle that children could really access?
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about the CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, please?
Right. Yeah. So we all have thoughts. And I always, teach kids, like we talked a little bit about, that our thoughts are our thoughts. And there's nothing wrong necessarily with our thoughts. Our thoughts, and especially for those who have like intrusive thoughts, those are unpleasant thoughts. My language to kids is, thoughts are just thoughts. It doesn't mean you actually feel that way. It doesn't mean it's actually going to come true. It just is something that, is your brain kind of telling you. And so the idea around CBT is that you're sort of asking the right questions. You're asking to sort of be a detective and test that thinking. And that's really where the Walter and the worry test came from. You're trying to reframe that thought pattern to see if there's any validity, any reason to believe that thought will come true. And through some of my research, I think it was through Penn State, they tell us that actually it's only 8% of the thoughts that you worry about will come true. So that means that 92% of what we worry about actually never really happens. So that's the thinking piece. And then the feelings, so those thoughts are then connected to the feelings, which I tell everybody. And one of the main messages in my story is that all feelings are okay. And I'll encourage children to say that all feelings are okay. And sometimes people will say to me, but Mrs. McGrath, my dad tells me that boys can't cry, or all feelings are not okay. And, while not all feelings are, not all feelings feel good to us. Some are less pleasant. But how do we kind of sit with that, and how do we manage some of those what doesn't feel well, to then be able to utilize coping strategies or things of that nature to kind of work through. And then that leads into our actions, our behavior. So what's highlighted in Walter and the worry test is Walter's feeling like he's going to fail his math test, or he that's his thought. I'm going to fail my math test. I'm not going to do well. And so that causes him to feel anxious. It causes him to feel insecure. And then as a result, he doesn't do well on his test because he's so flooded by his emotions that he's not able to access all the things that he knows. And that's really the cognitive behavioral triangle in a nutshell.
Wow. I never worried about not doing well on a math test because I knew I wasn't going to do well on a math test, and I knew there was nothing I could do about it. And so it's like...
You needed Walter.
Wow. This is really fascinating. I'm wondering, one of the things that I do with and suggest to authors who come to me and say, oh, you've been performing in front of kids for decades, and I get so nervous when I go out there, and young magicians tell me, I'm so nervous, I freak out. And I tell them that, and they ask me, don't you feel nervous? And it's like, I've trained myself. I understand that the feelings, the butterflies that you get when you're nervous and, the heart racing and everything, those are the exact same physical responses you experience when you're excited about something. And so I have just train myself to think when I feel those butterflies, it's like, oh, I'm not nervous. I'm excited and I'm going to have a great time. And it really works for me. And I've been told by some of the people I shared that with that it worked for them. Is that kind of something that you're doing on a much more important scale?
Yes, absolutely. And that is important too. And you're reframing that feeling, which is incredible. And so I think that's a perfect example. And in the first pages of the book, the illustrator, let me just shout out Marty Ashwell. She is incredible. And what she did was sort of took my vision. And in the first pages of the book, we talk about butterflies. And so she is able to kind of personify these butterflies and what they look like. And, when I'm reading it aloud, we talk a lot about how that sensation, almost like, your belly's doing flips or you're on a roller coaster or butterflies in your belly, whatever you want to call it, it can be often connected to feelings of anxiety, but it can also be impacted and connected to feelings of being excited. So we pause there and we talk about what that's like. And then as a result, how does that make you, what is the impact there? I know that when I feel butterflies in my belly, I don't always want to eat. So I'm not able to have a good breakfast. And then that kind of leads into how, it impacts the rest of your day. So I think in my next book, we'll talk a little bit more about sensations, body sensations, and how that's often connected to what we do and how that makes the brain and the body connection, all of there's so much value in really helping children kind of understand more about themselves and what they need in that way.
One of the things I heard recently on another podcast is that an expert came on and she was saying, one of the reasons her research showed that kids are more anxious these days is because we're focusing more on what they're anxious about. We're talking about all these emotions and this, and we're talking and we're getting kids to focus on it, and it's just magnifying things, and it's making kids sicker instead of healthier. What's your thought about that?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would necessarily 100% agree with that. I think kids are more willing to talk about things because it's more widely accepted and there's a place for them to do so. As I was saying, back when we were kids, I don't know that I knew who my school counselor was, and that wasn't all that long ago. So I think research is probably showing and data is probably showing that there are more anxious children, but I'm actually not sure that that's the case. I think things were underreported for so long, and I think a lot of kids who were feeling anxious probably didn't come forward to share that, and as a result, engaged in risky behavior or other things because they weren't able to get the support that they needed.
Yeah. You and I were talking a little bit about the fact that the job of a school counselor, the job of a teacher, the job of a librarian has really changed in recent times. My wife certainly has talked about the fact that when she started teaching more than 34 years ago, it was more fun for her. In the last 10 or 15 years of her career, it was much more challenging. Is that something that you're experiencing?
So it's interesting because my experience has been that I was in a more administrative role, and I've sort of gone back and forth between administration and supporting children, and I'm where I need to be and want to be right now. I have a passion for helping children, and I think it's bigger than anything. So I really love this work, and I love seeing the impact. I think as far as classroom teachers go, I think kids are bringing a lot more now into the classroom than they ever did before. And I think oftentimes for children, school is their safe place. And so teachers are being asked to be caregivers and, all of those things, and pay attention to teaching to standards and curriculum, and so that kids can be successful on tests. So I do think there is an added pressure. But one of the things that I think is so important is that we now look at the whole child, as opposed to just how are they doing with their reading, writing, and math. And I think that really brings me to the world of social emotional learning and why it is so important, because I will tell you that if you, and I'm sure your wife would tell you too, that if you are not available for learning and you don't feel good and you're distracted by your worries like I was as a child, you're not going to be focused on your reading, your writing, and your math. You're not going to be able to access all that you know because there's other stuff that's getting in the way. So I think there's definitely a lot more responsibility on the teachers. I think we know kids better than we ever have before. But I do think teachers are definitely being asked to do a lot. Yeah,
they certainly are. I remember during the pandemic when it first started, suddenly, there was a lot of talk about, wow, we have to do something because, whatever the percentage was, and it was a crazy high percentage, 70% of the kids get most of their nutrition at school, and these kids are going to starve if we don't get and I thought to myself, and I was like wondering, why aren't we horrified by that number? Why is it, are we waiting? Why was it okay that all these kids are depending on school to get their nutrition? Why don't we address that problem? It's, so that families don't have to rely on school, so that they do have the support they need so that kids can come to school ready to learn.
Yeah, and I think some of that speaks to stigma and feeling uncomfortable, sharing. And I will say in Massachusetts, kids now are getting breakfast and lunch, for free. And so my kids are getting lunch and breakfast most days, but lunch every single day. But no, you're right. And I think the pandemic brought to our attention a lot of things that maybe we weren't aware of or maybe didn't think too much about before then.
Yeah. Earlier, when we started the show, I was sharing that, I visited many schools over the course of my career performing that don't have a school counselor. Can you talk, just give your profession a plug and let everybody know why it's so important to have a school counselor available for kids and how it probably is more cost effective in the long run?
I'm so glad to hear you say that. I'm finding myself getting a little emotional because I could talk about this all day long, and it is my passion. And I truly feel like I was suggesting before, if kids do not feel good about themselves, if kids are being bullied, if school is not a safe place, if their mind is distracted by their worries or what's going on at home, or their family member that's sick, or any number of things, how are they going to come into school and be available to learn? How are they going to be expected to come to school and perform? Like we talked a little bit about the brain and the frontal lobe. How are they going to be able to access that, their fund of information and use their critical thinking skills when that amygdala is so activated? And so what a school counselor, at least it's my hope, that a school counselor would provide a safe space for children to be as well adjusted to school as they possibly can. So whatever that means, whatever it is for that child that's making adjusting to school difficult, it is my passion to be able to support that child in any way. And so I often see kids individually. I'll see kids in groups. I'll go into classrooms and teach. And really, I'm able to then see a large amount of kids in a short amount of time, which really helps me to build a relationship with children. And that is at the center of it all.
Yeah. So important. And, invest the money when the kids are young, get them adjusted, get them learning. And you probably don't have to spend money on the other end when there's more behavior problems or they're dropping out or ending up homeless on the streets or whatnot. It just makes so much sense to me. Invest early and help the kids grow healthy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And now, Walter and the Worry Test, is this a great book for a classroom library, for a family library, for all libraries?
Yeah, great question. And so I think it was funny because I was just talking to a school counselor today, and she said, it's a little dense for some of our maybe younger children. I sort of envisioned somebody like myself, a school counselor or a caregiver or a teacher, kind of reading it and kind of approaching it with questions along the way to make it applicable. I would say school counselors, definitely, caregivers, librarians for sure. I also have some activities that go along with the story, which I'd be happy to share as well to anybody that would, find it useful. But I think definitely ages like 6, 7 to 12 would probably be able to apply what the text is saying to their everyday life and make that connection.
Yeah. So Walter and the Worry Test was created to be read together as a family.
That's right.
Yeah, we love that. Alison, tell everybody where we can go to find out more about Walter and the Worry Test and find out more about you.
Yes, so you can learn more about me at my website. It's www.authoralisonmcgrath.com. The book is available there. If you order directly through my website, there's a link there. I will gladly sign and send for you. And you can also order at Amazon. You can order through Barnes & Noble and any other major retail bookstore.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait for book 2 to come out. And
we might need to give it a little bit of time, but it's in the works.
We're so excited that Walter and the Worry Test is available for schools and classrooms and homes. And we've had a great time speaking to the author, Alison McGrath. Alison, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Hey there, families! Are you looking for an exciting way to bond and learn together? Look no further than our STEM is Family Fun video series. Join us as we explore the fascinating world of STEM through hands-on activities right in your own home. Our series features lessons from experts at renowned institutions like the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum, the National Children's Museum in Washington, D.C., and Children's Museum Houston. From making homemade rainbow bridges to creating an oboe out of a straw, there's something for everyone in the family to enjoy. So grab your lab coats and get ready for an adventure. Go to readingwithyourkids.com and click on the STEM is Family Fun link at the top of the page and let the learning and laughter begin. STEM is Family Fun, where learning and bonding go hand in hand. My friends, I know we're going to have a great time because my guest and I just had a fantastic conversation before we even hit record. We probably should have hit record earlier. Coming to us from the beautiful state of Vermont, he is here to celebrate his brand new picture book. It's called Reading Together. Please welcome to the show, Robert Broder. Robert, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Delighted to have you on. I'm real excited. Tell us all about Reading Together, please.
So, Reading Together started in my imagination when I was staring at my daughter's bookcase one day, and I noticed we hadn't read a picture book in a few months. And the reason why we hadn't read a picture book in a few months was because she was getting older. Mm-hmm. And we were transitioning out of the picture books. And these picture books we read hundreds of times. And the stories and the characters became a part of our family. I enjoyed reading them. Sometimes she picked a couple. Sometimes I would pick a couple. Which books are we reading tonight? And I started missing reading them and we were moving on to other genres of books and chapter books and stuff. But the characters and all of the shouting and the whispering and the staring at the pictures and the illustrations and seeing her reaction, and while you're reading to your child, you can see their eyes are moving around the page and glancing at all the different things. And so there I just started writing about reading to your child and how we did read to our daughter the moment we brought her home, and how we just started reading books, and it was board books and pop-up books, and then the early readers, and then the early readers became picture books. But we also started a picture book press because we loved picture books so much. So we started a picture book press called Ripple Grove Press. And it was based on my wife and I talking about how much we love books. And we started talking about the stories after we put her to sleep. When we'd walk out of the room and close the door, my wife and I would talk about her reaction to these stories and to the pages or to a specific spread or a specific word. And there I came up with reading together.
That's awesome. You know, as you were speaking, I just, you know, I love my kids. They're adults now, and I love the relationship I have with them. I know that relationship was built on a foundation of reading with them. And I'd love to say that I read with them, and my beautiful wife and I read with them because we knew of all the benefits. But really, we read to them because it was so much fun.
Right. I mean, when in the book I talk about all the different things we read, and then, for example, talking about fun, you know, I say in the book, I mean, I can hold it up. I mean, we say, then we started reading about superheroes. We'd point to each panel, and we would help, and you would help with the automatopoeias. Bam, whack, zonk. Bath towels became capes. Couch cushions became hideouts. We'd wrestle, and you always won. Because that's exactly what happened when we started reading all of these things.
Yeah.
We would point to the panels, and she would help with the automatopoeias. And so, it was fun.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you just said, yeah. So it just, I remember very clearly just staring at her bookcase going, oh, I guess we're not reading these books tonight. And it was almost a little bit of a loss. Because she was just getting older, so she didn't want to read the picture books anymore. And so it was a little bit of a loss from my perspective of saying goodbye to these characters that we read so many times.
Yeah.
The Dr. Seuss books and the Piggy and Elephant books and the picture books.
It is. I just helped stage a literacy fair at a school outside of Boston, and we had a really nice turnout. It was an urban school, and they had no idea how many folks would come in on a Saturday morning, but we had about 100 folks, and the kids had to have an adult with them, and it was long. We created this thing thinking that parents would come in and out, and we might have 10 people at a time or whatever. They stayed from the beginning to the end. And it was so much fun. And I remember being up and talking to the parents and encouraging them to read every night and sharing with them all the benefits that they would get, and how coming home and reading with your kids after a long, aggravating, miserable day at work and you're exhausted and you don't want to do anything. But when you make the choice to sit down and read with your kids for 15 or 20 minutes, how invigorating that is, how uplifting. You suddenly, all the aggravation that you experienced at work that day, it's like dirt going down the drain.
Brings it down. No matter, even if, let's say we had a night where we got in late, we still would read picture books because it was a way to just, okay, the day is ending. Mm-hmm. And we're going to read a few and just call it a night.
Yeah. And what a great way, reading together. This book is, I'm just imagining it would be the perfect book as you're approaching that kind of transition time with your kids. and letting them know, as you know, you're proud of them, that they're able to read independently, and I still want to read together with you, even when you're a teenager. But still, this is like, well, let's look back and remember how much fun we've had the last few years.
Exactly it. The very last spread on the book is the child reading alone, and the parents are looking in on the child. I actually took a picture of that. I walked by one day seeing my daughter read in her room, and I sent that to the illustrator, and I said, just, do what you wish. And then it's filled with imagination in her room, and the parents are peeking in. And yeah, we've just, by reading so much, we've turned our child into a reader.
Yeah.
And that's the point of the book too, is that just the fun of reading.
Yeah. This is beautiful. You've been a big part of many families' reading experience, not only as an author and as a publisher, but you're a librarian.
Yes. So I'll share with you what we were just talking about before the meeting started,
Please.
Which was, I used to be a preschool teacher. I was a pre-K teacher, and that's where my kind of writing began. I started telling them stories. I was making up stories. Each morning, I would tell them stories where I'd leave it with a cliffhanger, and then I would have them and you're not going to believe what happened, and then I'll tell you the rest tomorrow. And they would go crazy that they wanted to hear what would happen now. And I remember, Jed, we were talking about things that little incidences happen to us and it sticks with you. I remember telling a group of children a made-up story, and a teacher approached me and said, "You should be reading them books." And I was like, well, I do read them books, but also I like to tell them stories. And the next day I grabbed a book, and I was pretending to read it, but yeah, I was still making up a story to kind of prove my point, which is stories and imagination can be anything.
Yeah.
So then that transitioned through many other jobs and transitions to where I am now a director at a library in a small town in Vermont. Yeah. So I'm surrounded by books and part of a really great community.
I love when we have a librarian on, whether it's a school librarian or a public librarian, because libraries are so very, very important, and they've changed. I mean, libraries were the first internet. Before we could sit down and at a phone or at a keyboard and just type in and get an answer right away. If you wanted to learn something, you'd go to the library, and the librarian would be like Google. I want to know about whatever.
You remember the microfilms? They would sit you in front of the machine with the microfilms.
I do. Roll it there.
Yep, the New York Times microfilms, and you'd have to do your book report with that.
Yeah. And so they've been, I think as technology has kind of advanced, I think a lot of us think, well, we don't really need libraries anymore because we have Kindles, we have this, we have the internet, but the libraries have evolved and they serve such an important purpose. Can you share just a little bit about the contributions your library makes to your community?
Absolutely. Well, we have current and old books, picture books, novels, nonfiction collection. So they can come in even a Vermont books collection, poetry, large print books, young adult novels, and a huge graphic novel collection from JF, juvenile fiction, to YA and adult periodicals. DVDs are still getting checked out. So we have a very vibrant DVD collection and even an audiobook collection. People still have CDs in their car or at home and they want to listen to an audiobook. We have a very vibrant digital, they can go online and log on for books and audiobooks. Not only that, the library offers lectures and workshops. We have a vibrant story time, and we have senior meetups, and we're going to be starting a parent and baby meetup. So we have a wonderful community room here, and it's just a place for people to come. We have a very vibrant acoustic jam. people that can come once a month and play together. So it's not just books and information; it's a meeting place. Mm-hmm. So, and it's just great to be part of that.
Yeah, it really is. I love performing in libraries to see families come together. When of course, when I'm performing there, there's setup time and breakdown time, so I can see what else is going on in the library, and I can see for a lot of kids, a library is a refuge. It's a safe space for them.
I agree 100%. We have in the libraries I've worked at, after school kids, they come and they know they can just hang out, especially for us, you have to be over the age of 11 to be in a library alone. And I agree. It is a place for them to just come and read and hang out, and feel safe, like you said.
Yeah. And the other thing I think it's important for us to remember is that as we're sitting here and we have our phone, we have our devices, we have 8 million channels to choose from on our televisions, we have to remember that not everybody is in the same boat. There are a lot of people who don't have access to the internet, and the only place they can get access is at the library, and they don't have the budget to buy books.
100%. We have computers. People can log in and check their email. We have a fax machine where people come weekly and send faxes from our library, and print things. Some people don't have a printer, don't want to buy a printer, or just don't need a printer, but maybe need it like twice a year. Mm-hmm. So they come and print things out. It's exactly it. It's also just a resource center as well.
Yeah. So please, everybody who's listening, support your local public library and make sure your kids have a librarian and a library at their school. I've shared this, Robert. My beautiful wife taught for 34 years in Boston, and one of the schools that she taught in, the library was literally a cage that was big enough for one person to go in, and kids would line up once or twice a week, and an aide in the cage would just hand them a book. There was no going through the aisles and selecting a book. It was just here, your next in here. And, every time my wife would come home and we took the kids to the library, I go, no, you didn't take the kids to the library. That's not a library.
Right. Yeah. Our library, we rent out bikes. We rent out sewing machines.
Wow.
Pickleball rackets. So we have a nice, collection of things as well, not just books. So it's nice that we have these to offer the public.
Yeah. Fantastic. You were sharing with me, you telling, when you were that pre-K teacher, you would tell stories and bring them up to the edge of a cliff and say, we'll get back to this tomorrow. I'm wondering, did you ever forget the next day what story you were telling? Because I did that with my kids. I would tell them a story, and my kids the next day go, pick up where you left off. And I'm like, I don't remember. What was I talking about?
I really didn't. I don't know why. Or they might remind me, but I did not forget because I think it's just my personality.
Uh-huh.
The way not my personality, just the way I can focus on something like that. But Ripple Grove is the publishing company I started with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And Ripple Grove came from my imagination. So it was a forest where, in my head, it was hundreds of years ago, fairies and trolls used to roam the woods. And I would tell them before, people were here. There used to be fairies, and each day there was a new sense of magic, something happened, trouble happened. So, from the trees to the river, to the trolls, it just was nonstop for me. So that's how Ripple Grove Press became about. But maybe it was just a little bit of, I don't know. I'm learning as the older I get, I have a little ADHD, or a lot of ADHD. So my hyper focus was just on that story, which actually maybe helps me when I write picture books, because once I have an idea, I can't stop thinking about it until it's complete.
Does that make sense? Does that make? That's like your superpower.
It's yeah, a little bit so, but I'm realizing it in my adult life than, you know, the maybe the struggles I had in school age years. But yeah, I would remember it. I would jot it down. I would jot things down constantly. This was before I was a published writer. I would always jot ideas down and then bring it home and elaborate more.
Yeah. I'm curious, what inspired you to start Ripple Grove Press?
That's a great question. So I was selling chocolate. I was living in Massachusetts, and my territory was Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine. And I was in the car a lot.
Yes, you would be.
And I came home one day and I said to my wife, what if we start a picture book press? And we'll just learn it. We'll just find stories. Yeah, we'll find artists. And we'll print the books and sell them. We'll figure it out. And she didn't respond. And then a week later, she said, you know that idea that you had about picture book press? It's not that bad. And I was like, right? Yes, come on, let's make it happen. So she came up with the idea of Ripple Grove Press from my story, Ripple Grove. And it literally, I was a sales rep and I was putting up on the Whole Foods community boards looking for submissions because Whole Foods was one of my customers. And I would be putting up on the bulletin board looking for submissions. Please email new press starting. And I started getting submissions. And then we got posted in Writer's Digest that we were looking for submissions. And then we were getting hundreds and hundreds of, by the time we got acquired, we were getting thousands of submissions a year.
Wow.
So, we learned the industry and we really we just got a website domain and made it as pretty as we knew how, and then, picked a couple stories to start and made it happen. And so I became a publisher and an art director and a developmental editor, and a writer all at the same time.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. What a great story and a great beginning to, something that's so important for families.
And we've met some wonderful people along the way making books. Some of our writers and illustrators have gone on to publish books with bigger presses too. So it's very nice to see it still going on.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned you just put up a note at Whole Foods that you were looking for submissions and they just started piling in. I know myself every semester I work with Emerson College and we have interns, and every semester I have dozens and dozens of applicants, folks wanting to work on the podcast, mainly because it has this association with kids' books. And I think, I don't know, why do you think there are so many adults who have this affection for kids' books, either to write them or talk about them or promote them?
So that's a good question. So I've read thousands of submissions, and you would be surprised how many adults do not read picture books, but they have an idea and they want to get it published, or they think their idea is good. But then when I sit down and talk to them, I would rattle off writers and illustrators and they didn't know, or have you read this book? No. Have you read that book? No. But I think to answer your question, it's that they have a connection to their childhood. And I don't know, maybe sometimes they think it's easy because it's a picture book, and maybe they think it's easier than writing a novel. But writing a picture book is very hard, and illustrating a picture book is very difficult. Yeah. And to show a story is very difficult. But they for me, when I do get an email from a parent saying they really enjoyed my book, and they read it to their child every night. That's really one of my favorite things about being an author.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Well, can I turn the question back to you? Why do you think adults?
I think it's that. I'd like to think it's because of the time somebody read to them. It's like they just associate these bright, colorful books with a warm feeling inside that they got when they were sitting on their dad's lap or their mom's lap or their grandparents' lap. Somebody older that they looked up to, and that was very important to them, choosing to spend time with them, shutting off the world.
It's an excellent point, which is what my book Reading Together is about.
Yeah.
I've been asked, what is my favorite, what picture book do I remember as a kid? And A Snowy Day by Ezra Jack Keats always sticks out. And it's Jack playing with the stick in the snow and making footprints in the snow and putting the snowball in his pocket. And when he goes inside, the snowball's gone. I remember that very vividly as a kid and to this day.
Yeah.
So it stays with you.
Yep. Of course, being in Boston, Make Way for Ducklings was something I read early. But the very first book that I owned, it was gifted to me, was a book, Mr. Bear Goes to Boston, about a bear from Maine who comes down on the train, the same train to North Station where I would go to see different things, and he just kind of cruises around Boston. And I remember that book. I remember at one point one of my dogs ate the cover. I can even remember the shape of the part of the cover that was gone from the dog's bite. But picture books, and it's just. It's a gift to the world, and I'm so glad to be a part of it in some little way with this podcast.
Yeah, me too, and I'm glad you reached out.
Yeah. Well, let's tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Reading Together and find out more about you and find out more about Ripple Grove Press.
RobertBroder.com. RobertBroder.com. You can Google. Look that up. My books are available anywhere online, wherever books are sold. Independent bookstores, please support them.
Mm-hmm.
You can see my books on my website, and they can take you to wherever you'd like to purchase them. But again, if your local bookstore does not have any of my titles, they can order them at those bookstores and get them.
Yeah.
They're through all the regular ordering channels.
Yeah. And you can go to your local public library and ask that they bring it into the library.
Exactly. If they don't have the book, they can order the book for you.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Or they can interlibrary loan it for you as well. They can borrow another book from another library. So they can get them. So thanks. Yeah. Thanks for that.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Reading Together. Our guest has been Robert Broder. Robert, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you. Nice to meet you.
We hope you've loved this episode of Reading with Your Kids, and I can tell you I would love it if you would join us for the next exciting episode of the show. In the meantime, I would also love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. We have a great YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids, where you can find episodes of the podcast. You can find our Drawing With Your Kids videos and our STEM is Family Fun videos. And of course, we'd love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can click the contact button up at the top of the page to send us a message. Let us know what you love about the show. Let us know what we could be doing better. And of course, we really would love to know who you would like to hear on a future episode of Reading with Your Kids. And if you are an author, please be sure to do yourself a favor and click the Authors Click Here button up at the top of the page. You can find out how you can be a guest here on the show. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of Kidlit fans all over the world about your great kids' books. You can also learn about our effective and affordable promotional services. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guests, Alison McGrath and Robert Broder. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Judy Hu, I want to thank my beautiful wife for all of her support. And most of all, we want to thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the show. And thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.